Welcome back to Questions for the Rector. I'm your host, Stephen Heiner, and with me is the Rector of Most Holy Trinity Seminary here in Reading, Pennsylvania, His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn. Hello, Your Excellency.
Hello, Stephen.
I shared with you that recently Father Jocelyn Legal gave a sermon in Paris talking about the declaration of November the 21st, 1974. And as Father was giving a sermon, I couldn't help thinking of a young Donald Sanborn sitting in a classroom listening to the words of this declaration. And I thought I would read this and also give some context so that people would understand where does this declaration come from. You can find this on the SSPX website. On November the 21st, 1974, Archbishop Lefebvre, scandalized by the opinions expressed by the two apostolic visitors, drew up for his seminarians, in a spirit of doubtlessly excessive indignation, this famous declaration as his stand against modernism. 10 days before, two apostolic visitors from Rome arrived at the St. Pius X Seminary in Acon. During their brief stay, they spoke to the seminarians and professors, maintaining scandalous opinions such as the ordination of married men will soon be a normal thing, truth changes with the times, and the traditional conception of the resurrection of our Lord is open to discussion.
They interviewed me. People should understand an apostolic visitation means you're in trouble. Right?
It's not a good thing.
It's not like a happy New Year or something like that. It's you're in trouble. And so they sent these two visitors, and they interviewed me, and it was kind of funny because I had been through the modernist seminary, so I knew a lot, about new theology and all. So, and I was very blunt with them about what I thought about it. And then for some reason or other, I lambasted Louvain. Louvain, well, it has always been, that's in recent times, the last 100 years, has been a hotbed of liberalism and bad theology. And that just Belgium in general has produced a lot of bad characters. And so I went on and on about Louvain. And one of them said, well, I was the rector of Louvain.
You thought that might be the end of the interview.
I forget what I said, but it was kind of funny.
I'm sure young Donald Sanborn did not take back anything he said.
No, I didn't take back a single word. No, I was happy to say what I said, and and all of that, that was the case. So Archbishop Lefebvre reacted to that. Now that idea of an excess of
indignation, editorializing, I think.
That was in the Angelus, and see, that was this excuse given for it. I will get to that, but that was not presented that way. In other words,
Did he seem excessively indignant?
No, I thought he was perfectly rational and wasn't like he was angry or anything like that. He was very much indignant about these people coming in and talking about their theology and as if there's something wrong with us when in fact they're all the problem. That was the idea of it. I mean, no, he was not in a rage or anything like that. Nothing, not at all. And I think that the declaration, which we'll talk about, is the true Archbishop Lefebvre. That diplomatic side that was always trying to get things going with Rome, I think was just sort of a
modus that he had to adopt as apostolic delegate?
No, I think it was just an imprudent decision of how to solve the problem in the church, in my opinion. I think he should have said, we are going to preserve Catholic tradition and we, come what may. In other words, we're not going to try to approach them at all. They are heretics, and we want nothing to do with them. We are going to preserve Catholic tradition and let Providence take its course. I think that's what he should have done, and I think he would have avoided all that zigzagging and inconsistency, because I think that this represents the true Archbishop Lefebvre. Just knowing him for those many years that I did. And talking to him, I mean, he hated modernism. He hated it with a passion, and he was very clear about the Catholic faith. So I think what you're going to hear there is the true Archbishop Lefebvre.
But we'll still see some expressions here which would be a legacy.
Yes.
We start in the very first. We hold fast with all our heart and with all our soul to Catholic Rome, guardian of the Catholic faith and of the traditions necessary to preserve this faith, to eternal Rome, mistress of wisdom and truth. And that phrase, eternal Rome, is something the SSPX to this day uses.
Yes, just like Catholic should never have an adjective on it, so Rome should never have an adjective on it. There's only one Rome, and it is, by its very nature and essence, faithful to the teachings of the Church. If it isn't, it's not Rome. Then it's just a place like Brooklyn or Passaic, New Jersey. See? Nothing against Passaic, New Jersey, but it's not, after all, Rome.
Or Brooklyn.
Or Brooklyn, for that matter, either. Or Squedunk. It's just nothing. It's just a ruin in Italy, that's all. If it isn't the center of Catholicism. Something like Athens, you might say, there's some ruins there and, they got built up. And if Catholicism, if that were not the capital of Catholicism, Rome would just not be a very significant place.
So he sets this up for the next paragraph by saying he adheres to eternal Rome, Catholic Rome. We refuse, on the other hand, and have always refused, to follow the Rome of neo-modernist and neo-Protestant tendencies, which were clearly evident in the Second Vatican Council and after the Council in all the reforms which issued from it.
Yes, it's again making that dichotomy between an apostate Rome and a Catholic Rome, which I just said you cannot make, but that's the way he said it. That's the way he presented it.
All these reforms indeed have contributed and are still contributing to the destruction of the Church, to the ruin of the priesthood, to the abolition of the sacrifice of the Mass and of the sacraments, to the disappearance of religious life, to a naturalist and Teilhardian teaching in universities, seminaries, and catechetics, a teaching derived from liberalism and Protestantism, many times condemned by the solemn magisterium of the Church.
Yes, I agree with all of that, and that's saying that this Rome, in quotation marks, the modernist thugs in Rome, let's put it that way, are imposing this. Not only that they are personally heretics, but they are imposing all of this upon the Church. That draws the conclusion that they have this evil intention, and that ruins their authority altogether.
Well, and as always, I say this Father Cicada trick of substituting the Vicar of Jesus Christ on earth and then adding the sentence. So right. These reforms, the Vicar of Jesus Christ on earth has contributed and is still contributing to the destruction of the Church, to the ruin of the priesthood, to the abolition of the sacrifice of the Mass. Yes. Suddenly it doesn't sound so appetizing.
No, it's the indefectibility of the Church. It means that those things cannot happen. The Spirit of truth, our Lord said, will always be with you. In other words, that means that it will always be guided by the Spirit of truth in all of its universal teachings, disciplines, and liturgy. In other words, that you could always follow the Catholic Church in good conscience because it is assisted by the Spirit of truth. All of that contradicts that if you associate that with the authority of the Catholic Church, and that's one of the central problems of the SSPX.
No authority, not even the highest in the hierarchy, can force us to abandon or diminish our Catholic faith, so clearly expressed and professed by the Church's magisterium for 19 centuries.
Well, ditto. In other words, again, you're saying that this authority, quote unquote, is forcing you to abandon the Catholic faith, and that's impossible. Let him be anathema, as St. Paul says. If I or an angel from heaven...
Well, you're very, very correct in your quote, because that's the next quote he gives. But though we, says St. Paul, or an angel from heaven, preach a gospel to you besides that which we have preached to you, let him be anathema. It's from Galatians. So for the Protestants watching, there is some scripture for you.
So, but anathema means you're out.
Right.
It's like at the ball game.
Right.
You're out. And it's you can't say, well, he's still a pope and but he's anathema. It's just anathema is a very, very strong word as St. Paul uses it. He says it twice. St. Paul repeats that in the Galatians, in the first chapter of Galatians. It's very emphatic.
Almost as if it was important.
I'm zero. and he says, if I, meaning in the in the impossibility that an apostle could do this. In other words, because they were personally infallible. But
he's trying to underline the gravity of this.
Yes, or an angel from heaven, and it was giving the appearance of authority. And so that's very clear. I mean, that should have brought him to the conclusion that these people are,
So he follows, is it not this that the Holy Father is repeating to us today? And if we can discern a certain contradiction in his words and deeds, as well as in those of the dicasteries, well, we choose what was always taught, and we turn a deaf ear to the novelties destroying the church.
Well, that's recognize and resist, and that is not something that is acceptable to the Catholic faith.
It is impossible to modify profoundly the lex orandi without modifying the lex credendi. To the Novus Ordo Missae correspond a new catechism, a new priesthood, new seminaries, a charismatic Pentecostal church, all things opposed to orthodoxy and the perennial teaching of the church.
All of that is true.
And might I ask you, what was the mood while this was being delivered, while you were all sitting there?
Well, we were all indignant about this apostolic visitation. It was just, it was like the devil coming into the house. I mean, these are the people that we are opposing.
We should be apostolic visiting you.
Yes, in other words. And Archbishop Lefebvre said that once when he was being interrogated by the thugs. He said, I am representing tradition. I should be asking you the questions, And it's true. It's true. Yes, but there was an atmosphere of let's say I don't know. I'm not going to say anger, but indignation. But it wasn't wild or a frenzy or anything like that.
But as he's delivering this, you're thinking to yourself, yes, that's right.
Yes, yeah, this is great.
serve me some more. This Reformation. And when he says Reformation, he's referring to Vatican II.
Well, in French, la réforme, and then that is the Reformation, so it comes over as Reformation in English.
Born of liberalism and modernism, is poisoned through and through. It derives from heresy and ends in heresy, even if all its acts are not formally heretical. It is therefore impossible for any conscientious and faithful Catholic to espouse this Reformation or to submit to it in any way whatsoever. The only attitude of faithfulness to the Church and Catholic doctrine, in view of our salvation, is a categorical refusal to accept this Reformation. Sounds like a rejection of Vatican II.
Yes. Well, he wrote a book, J'accuse le Concile, I accuse the Council. What else do we need? I mean, but that's on the zig column. He wrote against the heresies.
If you're unfamiliar with what His Excellency is referring to, there's this idea of zigging and zagging, and that there's a column on any given day that you could zig or you could zag, and you could have statements like this and others that...
Yes. Others that after John Paul II was very nice to him, and then it all changed over to, being very, how would you say, conciliatory with the modernists. Everything changed with that.
This is why, without any spirit of rebellion, bitterness, or resentment, we pursue our work of forming priests with the timeless magisterium as our guide. We are persuaded that we can render no greater service to the Holy Catholic Church, to the Sovereign Pontiff, and to posterity. That is why we hold fast to all that has been believed and practiced in the faith, morals, liturgy, teaching of the catechism, formation of the priests, and institution of the Church, by the Church of all time, to all these things as codified in those books which saw day before the modernist influence of the Council. This we shall do until such time that the true light of tradition dissipates the darkness obscuring the sky of eternal Rome. So all sorts of catchphrases there. You're saying the Church of all time, the true light of tradition, eternal Rome.
Yes, a confused ecclesiology, and yes, that's the center of their problem. And SSPX.
And SSPX faithful will repeat these phrases chapter and verse to this day. There's sort of a catechism around it.
Yes.
By doing this with the grace of God and the help of the Blessed Virgin Mary and that of St. Joseph and St. Pius X, we are assured of remaining faithful to the Roman Catholic Church and to all the successors of Peter, and of being the Fideles Dispensatores Mysteriorum Domini Nostri Jesu Christi in Spiritu Sanctu. Amen.
It's a quote from St. Paul.
November the 21st, 1974, Icone.
I remember it.
Things go downhill from here.
They do.
A suspension, a suppression of the congregation, disbanding of the seminary, effectively in legal form from the authorities.
Yeah, he was suspended in 1974, if I recall.
75?
June of 70. So maybe 75.
Because this
75.
This is November 74, so I think the suspension comes
75. And yes, that's when I was ordained. Just after that suspension, I couldn't care less, frankly. And I thought it was good. And then the Society of St. Pius X was suppressed in 76.
Right. So things go downhill after this declaration.
Well, what went downhill was he was called down to Rome after this. And when he came back, he gave a conference, and I remember it distinctly, where he said, I told them that I did this in anger. I practically died when he said that.
Because it would imply, I didn't really mean it.
Right. It's effectively recanting it. And it's not really all true. I mean...
And hence, as you picked out, the header on the SSPX website where I pulled this from says... in excessive indignation.
Yes, because all of that argues sedevacantism, that whole thing argues sedevacantism. But of course, they don't want to espouse that. That's evil. And so they had to say it but he didn't present it as that, as, this act of angry and excessive indignation. Not at all. I mean, he didn't do that. That's some comment in order to soften the blow of what that is, as they published that 50 years later.
Right, but it's a blow that he also gave to you all when he came back and told you that.
Yes.
So he's under pressure. He's officially suspended by the person who he thinks is the Holy Father, ostensibly to the general public. 1976, we have the suppression of Icone, of the society. And so I think he figures it's all over with Paul VI. But he doesn't really think too much of Paul VI. If I remember what you have said that Father Gapon has told you.
Father Gapon told me, Father Gapon often was his chauffeur as he drove around in France and various other parts of Europe. And Father Gapon told me that Archbishop Lefebvre told him in the car, I don't think that Paul VI is the Pope. Now, Father Gapon was a person who would not make up stories.
He's not a storyteller.
He is of absolute credibility, and he would never say that unless it were true. And so I think that is the true Lefebvre too. I think in his heart he didn't think that Paul VI was really the Pope. But again, that external position with the hope of getting themselves approved. It was the eternal flame, so to speak, and dragged them into the conciliatory attitude and statements, etc., which we call the zag column. In other words, and that's the SSPX and Archbishop Lefebvre. They have not stopped since. I mean, now if you notice recently, they're trying to get approval to consecrate 4 bishops, 4 bishops. There's a good cop, bad cop approach. The Father Pagliarani said that the synod is, what was the quote? A reversal of a diabolical reversal of the gospel, a continuation of Vatican II. And all sorts of other very nasty things about, Vatican II and the Reform and everything like that. But then Father Pfluger in Germany, District Superior of Germany, was very mild, and we would like to get this permission, and the ecclesial.
Won't you accompany us?
Yes, it was very, very bland. So I think it was, whatever fits we're going to use. And if we have to defend ourselves against an excommunication, well, then we're going to say all of these nasty things about Vatican II. Or, if they say yes, then we'll be nice again. And it's hard to take them seriously. I mean, what's the coordination between Father Pfluger and the Superior General?
Clearly not. And so from 74 until, I'm going to read from a letter that he sent to what he calls the Holy Father in Christmas Eve 1978. It would be republished in Letter to Friends and Benefactors number 16, which came out in March of 1979. You can find this on the internet. We can also put a link in the description. And there's a shift here, but I think it's revelatory. And again, we can, as before, we'll stop and you can comment. Most Holy Father, it is impossible that the audience which you granted me was not the will of God. For myself, it was a great comfort to be able to explain quite openly the circumstances and motives surrounding the existence of the Society of St. Pius X and its seminaries, and the reasons which led me to continue the work in spite of the decisions coming from Fribourg and Rome.
Now he's talking to John Paul II here.
Right.
Yes,
this is post Bear Hug.
Yes, okay.
The flood of changes in the Church, accepted and encouraged by the bishops, a flood devastating everything in its path, faith, morals, the institutions of the Church, could tolerate no obstacle, no resistance. We had therefore the choice either to let ourselves be swept away by this stream of havoc, thereby adding to the disaster, or to resist, against wind and tide, to safeguard our Catholic faith and Catholic priesthood. We were not slow to decide. Since May the 5th, 1975, the date of our decision to stand firm, whatever the cost, 3.5 years have passed and have shown us to be right. The ruins of the Church pile up. Atheism, immorality, abandoned churches, the disappearance of religion and priestly vocations are now such that the bishops have begun to be worried, and the success of Icone is constantly brought to mind. Opinion polls show that a large number of the faithful, sometimes even a majority, are in favor of the attitude adopted by Icone. It is obvious to any impartial observer that our work is a seedbed of priests such as the Church has always wished for and the true faithful have always desired. And one is entitled to think that if Rome would admit the fact and give it the legality to which it has a right, vocations would be even more abundant. Most Holy Father, for the honor of Jesus Christ, for the greater good of the Church, and for the salvation of souls, we entreat you to say one word, a single word, as the successor of Peter and as pastor of the universal Church, to the bishops of the entire world. Laissez-faire. Let them be. We authorize the free practice of what many centuries tradition has made use of for the sanctification of souls. What difficulty would such an attitude create? None. The bishops would decide the places, the times reserved for this tradition. Unity would immediately be restored at the level of the local bishop. On the other hand, how advantageous it would be for the Church, the renewal of seminaries and monasteries, great fervor in the parishes. The bishops would be amazed in a few years to rediscover an outburst of devotion and holiness they thought had disappeared forever. So I think this is a really crucial paragraph, because there's a real naivete here from the Archbishop that the bishops would be amazed in a few years to rediscover the bishops are the ones who did this.
Right. Yes. No, they are a corrupt group of thugs.
And his entire idea, we could say, has been test marketed by the indult Fraternity of St. Peter. And how has that reception been going?
Not too well.
So this idea that once we have a chance for the quote-unquote experiment of tradition, everyone's just going to see how great it is, and you're going to dump the new mass, and you're going to put the sanctuaries back in place. Communion rails are coming back. Veils are coming back. There's a real delusion from the Archbishop here.
Yes, that was always his thought. He said, I remember when I was at Icone, he said that they're not interested in theology, they're interested in numbers. And so if that's the whole presentation,
he's saying that the authorities,
yes, the thugs in Rome, and that they're interested in numbers, they're not interested in theology. So that's what he's presenting here. You're going to see, a big resurgence of piety and
a new springtime.
If you do this, and which was true. Probably, if you restored the traditional mass to all of the parishes of the world, you'd see people come piously as they used to. But the bishops were not interested in that at all. They were all modernists. And he was talking, and JP2 was a modernist from the day he was ordained, or even before that.
Thinking that the perpetrators of the crime are going to try to undo their crime.
Right. It's like asking the mafia, not the. It's
got a great idea for taking out the trash in New Jersey. Right. For Acon, its seminaries, and its priories, the situation would be made normal, as happened with the Congregation of Lazarists and Redemptorists. The priories would serve the diocese by the preaching of parish missions, Ignatian retreats, and by helping in the parishes in complete submission to the local ordinary. The situation of the church would be greatly improved by this very simple method, which is so consistent with the maternal spirit of the church, not refusing those who come to the aid of souls, not extinguishing the wick which is still smoking, but rejoicing to see that the vitality of tradition is full of life and hope. This is what I believed I had to write to your holiness before appearing before His Eminence Cardinal Sapir. I fear that long and detailed discussions will not lead to a satisfactory result, and will merely prolong a situation which I am convinced must seem urgent to you. A solution cannot in fact be found in any compromise which would in practice cause our work to vanish, thereby adding yet another contribution to the destruction. Remaining at the entire disposition of your holiness, I beg you to accept my profound and filial respect in Jesus and Mary. Marcel Lefebvre, sent Christmas Eve, 1978.
Yeah, no, he was living in a world that was not in not reality. He thought that these people were still pious, that they were still fundamentally Catholic, and that they would be very happy to see all this happen, and that the influence of the modernism would not in any way influence his priests or his congregations, under the the authority of the local bishop. I mean,
and yet we've seen this belied by numerous situations. We've seen SSPX priests leave the society and join the diocese. Mm-hmm. We've seen them leave and join the Fraternity of St. Peter. We've seen some of the priests in Argentina receiving stipends from the diocese.
We saw Bishop Tissier in a Novus Ordo church in Florida.
So there's
giving confirmations.
There is a lot of cooperation seeming to go on.
Yes. Yeah.
So it has been realized, but not with the modernists giving up anything.
No.
It's the SSPX who's had to go in there, and as you say, Bishop Tissier, behind him, I think, was a jumbotron, or at least a flat screen. And
you could say, screen, yes.
Looks like a megachurch, but apparently it's a Novus Ordo.
A Novus Ordo church, giving confirmations of all things in a Novus Ordo church. What does that say about the Novus Ordo? Except that it is an acceptable religion, that it's a form of Catholicism.
Or in fact, the only legitimate one. There's numerous photos that can be found on the internet of the society priest standing off to the side while the Novus Ordo priest does the legal form of the marriage, and then he steps in to do the mass, which obviously the Novus Ordo priest doesn't know how to say, but they don't have jurisdiction, so they have to let the Novus Ordo priest do it. And we see these closer and closer integration that what he's talking about, what the Archbishop was saying, yes, we do want to be integrated. But the modernists are not giving up anything. No.
And they don't intend to. If anything, they're going to take things back. In other words, you'll see what happens. But also, I'm told that, from somebody who has experience, that the theology in those organizations like FSSP and Christ the King is new theology. I mean, that it is Vatican II theology. That's what I'm told. I don't know. I can't say that for sure because I don't know. But that they're not. That this is what I'm told, that they are not approaching using the traditional theology books, etc. Now, that's what I'm told by somebody who knew. And but I mean, I'm not surprised. And also notice that the SSBX has said virtually nothing condemning the Novus Ordo, all of the outrageous things that the Novus Ordo has done over the past 10 or 12 years. Nothing at all, silent. And those other organizations, silent. As the faith is slapped in the face, as our Lord Jesus Christ goes through his passion, so to speak, with this horrid new religion, nothing is said. And
we've often alluded. I even remember working with Father Cicada on a work on the fat lady is going to sing, etc. And we've seen that trotted out. But I do think the death of Bishop Tissier, the fact that the SSPX effectively only now has 2 bishops for a worldwide apostolate of thousands of faithful, hundreds of priests.
And they're not young men.
No. So there is going to have to be a decision on this. And I do think that whatever way that decision goes is going to be really critical for the society in the sense of, if what I suspect is the case, and I'd be curious to see if you agree, Your Excellency, is they're going to have a conciliar bishop consecrate and say, you can have as many bishops as you want, but guess who's going to do the consecration? Not you, Bishop Follet, and not you, Bishop de Galareta. We will do, which then imposes the question, which I think there's a minority still, but a significant number of SSPX faithful who do not accept the validity of the new rite of episcopal consecration.
I think that would go over like a lead balloon, frankly.
Well, Father Phillipson told us about the fact that some SSPX faithful had complained that they would not attend his masses before he had been conditionally ordained. So,
no, I think that would be they're up against it. I mean, they have really played all of their cards wrong. They have been hoping for reconciliation all these years, with after 2012, hoping that something would happen, and now they are caught right now without any hope really of any kind of reconciliation. But if the Vatican is astute, let's say, for their own purposes, they will do what you said.
Bergoglio's pretty savvy. I think he's proven himself to be that way in many
we'll
ways.
give you bishops.
All the bishops you want.
Right.
You want regularization, we'll give you that too.
Yes, we'll give you bishops, because that will be the grain of incense for them, yes.
And I remember them trotting out, I think they were given faculties for commemoration for a holy year, the year of mercy, and they trotted that around too. It says, well, we have faculties, you can't say we're schismatic. It's like, okay, well.
Right. No, I think Bergoglio knows what he's doing, and he might just offer that to them. And if they refuse, then,
the dance goes on.
Then the Vicar of Christ becomes the Antichrist, and that we saw in 1988. And then after the ceremony, he was the Vicar of Christ again. And then by 1991, he was the Antichrist again, because Archbishop Lefebvre apparently said no more negotiations with Rome until they return to the faith, before he died. So, but then he became the Vicar of Christ again, because they were negotiating all during the early 2000s, and up to 2012. I mean, they almost did it in 2012, but Ratzinger cut it off, saying there were doctrinal differences.
And that's true.
Yes, I mean, at least he said that. Yeah, there were doctrinal differences.
One adheres to some Catholic notions, and the other is pushing for the agenda Vatican II.
And Bergoglio said a year or two ago that you can't have your own interpretation of Vatican II. It has to be the Church's interpretation.
Which is true.
Yes,
right?
of course. If he's the Vicar of Christ, that's absolutely true. You can't, have your own spin about councils and whatnot.
Well, and I the reason I picked this bookmark is this is 1974 to 1978 Archbishop Lefebvre, but it's 2024, soon to be 2025 SSPX. The legacy continues.
Yes. Zigzag and flip-flop.
And for those watchers and listeners who either attend the SSPX or know people who attend the SSPX, please consider sharing this video, liking it, subscribe to the channel, and have them consider. Again, His Excellency was eyewitness to these events and had a chance to interact with the Archbishop. And even if you weren't an eyewitness and you can look at this, you can see what the SSPX is doing now in the present day, and the inconsistencies are at best troubling, I would say.
Inconsistency is a sure sign of error. That's a general principle. Truth is always connected and one. Inconsistency is a sure sign of error. And if there is inconsistency, you're in error. But many times people just care about going to Mass. And that's not good in this situation. They just want a place where there's devotions and Mass and nuns and schools and things like that.
Friday fish fries.
Well, yeah, in other words, just trying to reproduce the old church, so to speak, in their lives. And that's not bad in itself. It's just that you have to approach this situation in an entirely Catholic way. Otherwise, you're going to deviate, and you're flirting with schism.
Right, Catholicism is not just as you're alluding to these externals. There has to flow from something. Don't bother me with theology.
Right,
I'm just here
right.
for the Mass.
Right. No, that's very common. Very common.
Well, thank you for sharing your reminiscences of this time in your life, which was many years ago.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
And I know our watchers and listeners are grateful as well. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you.